Hey guys, today we're diving into another truly horrifying case. If you want to support my channel, make sure to subscribe and stay active. It really helps me out. I'd be super grateful for that. Let's get started. The morning of February 20th, 2005, in Mount Laurel, New Jersey, began like any ordinary Sunday for John Audebray. He had a simple family plan. He was heading over to his sister Danielle's house to help her with a few things around the place. But when he got there, no one answered the door. He rang the bell, knocked, even called her name, but the house was silent. John tried calling her cell, but it went straight to voicemail. That raised a red flag, but it wasn't enough to set off full-blown panic. He reached out to their mother, Felice, who suggested Danielle might have stayed the night at Richard Patrone's, the guy she had recently been seeing. It sounded plausible, so John used his spare key, went inside, took care of the planned repairs, and then left. Across town, Richard Patrone's family was starting to notice something was off too. Richard's mother, Margaret, was expecting company that day. Friends were coming over to watch a big race. But when the guests arrived, Richard was nowhere to be found. His phone, like Danielle's, wasn't ringing through. Margaret knew Richard had gone out with Danielle the night before, and just like Felice, she figured he'd probably stayed at her place. But that theory started falling apart pretty quickly. At 11 a.m., Danielle missed an appointment at the salon, something she had scheduled with her friend Christine, who also happened to be Richard's sister. Danielle was known for being reliable, and blowing off plans without a heads up was completely out of character. Christine called her multiple times, but the phone was still off. Both Danielle and Richard had gone dark, and that's when concern started turning into serious worry. Around 5 p.m., Danielle's ex-husband, Joe Imbo, arrived to drop off their 1.5-year-old son like he usually did. He immediately noticed something was wrong. Danielle wasn't at the door to greet them. Instead, her relatives were there. They told him she had gone out the night before and hadn't come back. Joe left their son in the care of Danielle's family and headed off, while her relatives started calling hospitals, emergency rooms, friends, anyone who might know something. But no one had heard from Danielle or Richard. Their whereabouts were a complete mystery. So was the black Dodge Dakota truck Richard had been driving that night. The same truck he was supposed to use to take Danielle home. At first, both families were convinced the couple had just stayed over at each other's place. Danielle's mom believed she was with Richard. Richard's mom thought he was with Danielle. But when they realized neither of them knew where the pair was, it hit them. They hadn't just lost contact. They were gone. There still wasn't full-scale panic, but the unease was growing fast. That was day one of the disappearance of Danielle Imbo and Richard Patrone, the beginning of one of the most puzzling missing persons cases in modern American criminal investigations. Before Danielle Imbo and Richard Patrone vanished, their lives looked like those of countless everyday people, routine, steady, with all the ups and downs of modern adulthood. The two first crossed paths thanks to Christine Patrone, Richard's sister and a longtime friend of Danielle's since their high school days. One evening, Christine invited Danielle out to dinner, and later that night, Richard joined them. That seemingly ordinary evening marked the beginning of a connection that would gradually deepen between Danielle and Richard. Danielle Audebray was born on August 7, 1970, in New Jersey. She was the youngest child of John and Felice Audebray, growing up alongside her older brother, John Jr. From a young age, Danielle showed a love for music. She had a beautiful singing voice and often performed in local talent shows and events. Eventually, she became the lead vocalist for a small rock band that played regularly in bars and restaurants around town. While nurturing her passion for music, Danielle also built a professional career in the financial sector, working in the loan department of a local car dealership. That's where she met Joe Imbo. He'd come in looking to buy a new car. Their relationship took off quickly, and in 2001, they got married. After the wedding, Joe asked Danielle to leave her music career behind and focus more on building a family life together. In 2003, they welcomed their son, also named Joe, who quickly became the center of Danielle's world. But things started to unravel shortly after. In 2004, Joe took off to attend the Super Bowl, leaving Danielle at home to care for their son, who wasn't feeling well. When he returned, he made an unexpected announcement. He wanted a divorce. Joe revealed that he had fallen for someone else. He moved out soon after, but continued to spend time with their son on weekends. Danielle, now a single mom, found herself juggling parenthood and financial responsibilities on her own. To provide for herself and her son, Danielle took a job at an insurance company, handling financial claims. The company allowed her to work from home, which helped her manage her schedule more flexibly. But the emotional toll of everything she was going through started to show. She began smoking more, reportedly up to a pack a day, and spent most of her time indoors, dividing her attention between work and her son. Only on the weekends, when her son stayed with his father, did she get any real time to herself. It was during one of those quiet evenings that she met up with Christine for dinner, the night Richard joined them, and things started to shift. Richard Petroni Jr. was born on August 29, 1969, in Philadelphia. He was the firstborn of Margaret and Richard Petrone Sr., and had two younger sisters, Christine and Alyssa. His family owned a bakery where Richard worked full-time as a pastry chef, specializing in wedding cakes. Those who knew him described him as a talented and dedicated professional, someone who truly took pride in his craft. At the age of 20, Richard became a father. His former girlfriend gave birth to their daughter, Angela. Although their romantic relationship didn't last, they remained on good terms and agreed to share custody. Richard moved into an apartment located just above his family's bakery. And from then on, Angela stayed with him during the week and spent weekends at her mother's place. He was deeply involved in his daughter's life, often bringing her along to work. Angela enjoyed helping out in the bakery, and those around them noticed how much time Richard dedicated to being a parent. He didn't just care for Angela, he made her a part of his daily routine. In 2004, when Angela entered her teenage years, she made the decision to move in with her mother. While that shift reduced some of Richard's day-to-day responsibilities, he continued to maintain regular contact with her. It was during this period, when both Richard and Danielle were reevaluating their pasts and their personal lives, that their bond began to grow stronger. Their families, who had known each other for years, welcomed the relationship and supported the connection. On the evening of February 19, 2005, a Saturday, Danielle Imbo accepted an invitation from Richard Petrone to spend the evening together in downtown Philadelphia. In the weeks leading up to that night, the two hadn't been in touch much. It was Danielle who had initiated a pause in their relationship after her divorce was finalized. But that night, she decided to meet up. Her son Joe was spending the weekend with his father, giving Danielle a rare chance to enjoy an evening out. The date fell during a long weekend celebrating President's Day. The city was alive with activity, streets packed with people enjoying the festive atmosphere, bars and restaurants filled to capacity. Despite the energy in the air, the temperature had dropped to around 26 degrees Fahrenheit. The chill was sharp, especially near the rivers and on open streets. Danielle and Richard met at a spot called Abilene, located at 429 South Street. The bar was a well-known local hangout, popular for its live music. By the time they arrived, the venue was already buzzing with people. A show scheduled that evening had drawn a decent crowd. At some point during the night, Richard's longtime friend Anthony Valentino joined them. He and Richard had known each other since they were 7. His appearance wasn't planned. Anthony happened to be at the same bar and came over to say hi. The three spent part of the evening together, chatting and watching the live performance. According to witness statements, Danielle and Richard looked very much like a couple. They sat close together, shared casual embraces, and seemed relaxed. There was no sign of tension or conflict between them. Bartenders and patrons later confirmed that both had a drink or two, just a couple of beers each. They didn't appear intoxicated, and throughout their time at the bar, their behavior remained calm and completely in control. The live performance wrapped up around 11:45 p.m. Some in the group, including Anthony Valentino, planned to keep the night going at another bar where another show was happening. But Richard and Danielle declined, explaining that the next day was reserved for spending time with their kids. They were ready to call it a night and head home to rest. Richard mentioned that he had parked his truck, a black 2001 Dodge Dakota, nearby. He offered to drive Danielle back to her place and then planned to head home himself. Nothing seemed unusual about their departure. According to witnesses, including Anthony, the two left the bar together and walked in the direction of where Richard had parked. That was the last time anyone saw them. No video footage captured their exit or any trace of their movement after leaving the venue. That night, they disappeared from the heart of the city without leaving any clear signs behind. It was the final confirmed sighting of Danielle Imbo and Richard Petroni. When a full day passed with no word from either of them, a missing persons report was finally filed with law enforcement. By that point, 24 hours had gone by since they were last seen. Until then, authorities had been hesitant to act, citing the fact that both were adults and may have chosen to remain out of contact on their own. The day after the official report was submitted, the search began in earnest. Loved ones sprang into action alongside law enforcement. Their first priority was to reconstruct the most likely route the couple would have taken from downtown Philadelphia to Danielle's home in Mount Laurel, New Jersey. According to the family's estimate, the route covered roughly 40 miles and included several bridges, most notably the Walt Whitman Bridge, a major structure connecting Philadelphia to southern New Jersey across the Delaware River. Given the direction they were headed, it seemed like the most logical path. Search efforts focused heavily on that bridge and the surrounding areas. John Otober Jr. and Richard's father spent hours driving through neighborhood after neighborhood, often retracing the same streets multiple times a day. Over the course of their search, they logged more than 13 hours behind the wheel. They created detailed maps of possible detours from the expected route, marking every intersection, parking lot, and area with limited visibility. They checked mall parking structures, highway pull-offs, vacant lots, abandoned buildings, and dead-end streets. Meanwhile, volunteers were distributing missing person flyers. The families had printed approximately 10,000 posters featuring photos of Danielle and Richard, along with details about the vehicle. They cast a wide net, posting the flyers on storefronts, bus stops, office buildings, car washes, and service stations, anywhere that might catch someone's eye. A major focus of the investigation was surveillance footage. Since the couple had left from a bar located right in the heart of the city, authorities expected that their vehicle would be caught on at least one camera along the route. Investigators reviewed footage from nearby businesses, ATMs, gas stations, retail stores, private residences, and government buildings. But after going through hours of recordings, there was nothing. No sign of Danielle, Richard, or a vehicle matching the description. Even the area where Richard had parked his black Dodge Dakota turned up nothing. There were no recordings of the truck entering or leaving the lot. This raised the possibility that the vehicle may have been parked in a blind spot outside the range of any available cameras. One of the first theories considered by investigators was the possibility of an accident. Since the route from Philadelphia to New Jersey includes several bridges, including the Walt Whitman Bridge, there was a chance the vehicle might have veered off the road and ended up in the water. This theory gained traction after a family member pointed out a section of damaged guardrail on one of the bridges. The tip was passed on to the authorities. The U.S. Navy sent in divers to inspect the riverbed. The search lasted an entire day. Several submerged vehicles were found, remnants from previous accidents, but none of them matched the make or model of Richard's truck. No personal items, no signs of Danielle or Richard, nothing to indicate a connection to the missing pair. At the same time, investigators began combing through additional sources: tow truck logs, traffic accident records, insurance reports, and hospital admissions. None of them provided any information linking to Danielle Imbo or Richard Petroni. What made this case especially complex was the fact that it involved two adults and a vehicle, not just a single person. The theory of a tragic accident became harder to accept given the urban setting, heavy traffic, and abundance of surveillance cameras and potential witnesses. Still, none of the inquiries produced any leads. Investigators were left with no concrete evidence to support any working theory. When neither the ground search nor surveillance analysis yielded results, the family decided to try a different approach: aerial reconnaissance. John Otober reached out for help, and soon a helicopter search was arranged. Though some reports suggested the operation might cost around $15,000, it was later revealed that the pilot volunteered his time and services for free. The helicopter scanned the city and surrounding areas, focusing on industrial zones, remote parking lots, wooded regions, and highway shoulders. Even from the air, no sign of the truck or the missing couple was found. Richard's pickup had vanished, along with Danielle and Richard, without leaving a trace. Not a single visual or digital clue. For several days, everyone involved continued searching tirelessly, trying to uncover even the smallest lead. Police kept interviewing anyone who might have information, including patrons who had been at the bar that night, but all they were able to gather had already been documented earlier. Without any fresh details or new evidence, the investigation hit a wall. By that point, the case had reached a standstill. No roots, no surveillance footage, no tips or theories brought investigators any closer to understanding what happened after 11:45 p.m. on that cold February night. In the early stages, the families of Danielle Imbo and Richard Petrone worked closely together. They joined forces in the search efforts, supported each other, made joint media appearances, and coordinated their outreach. At first, it felt like they were united in a shared mission to bring Danielle and Richard home. But as time passed with no breakthroughs and with no new clues emerging, tensions began to rise between the two families. A few weeks after the disappearance, quiet suspicions began to surface. Some members of Richard's family started to question whether this could have been an accident at all. A few even speculated, without any hard evidence, that Danielle might have played a role in the disappearance and then vanished herself. The theory was based on nothing more than frustration and confusion, but it began to circulate. In response, Danielle's family developed their own theory. Perhaps Richard's past had caught up with him, and whatever happened that night was the result of something he had been involved in. Again, there was no concrete evidence to support this claim. The growing rift became undeniable. The two families stopped collaborating. Each began working independently, limiting communication and ending all joint public statements. While the main investigation continued, detectives turned their attention to those closest to Danielle. One person who stood out was Joe Imbo, her ex-husband and the father of her son. According to available information, not long before Danielle's disappearance, Joe had expressed interest in reconciling. Relatives of Richard claimed that Joe had reached out to him several times, making phone calls and expressing strong disapproval of his relationship with Danielle. According to Richard's parents, one of those calls allegedly included a warning: if Richard didn't back off, there would be consequences. While the exact content of those calls couldn't be verified, phone records confirmed that the calls did take place. This was enough to prompt investigators to take a closer look at Joe's whereabouts during the time of the disappearance. On the night Danielle and Richard went missing, Joe was reportedly staying at his parents' house, spending the weekend with his son. Other members of the household were present that night as well. All of them gave consistent statements. Joe had not left the house, went to bed before midnight, and stayed in for the rest of the night. Multiple witnesses confirmed his presence, and none of their accounts showed any inconsistencies. Police carefully reviewed all the information and ultimately concluded that Joe had a solid alibi. There was no direct evidence linking him to the disappearance. Still, his name continued to surface in online discussions. Rumors, theories, and speculation began to spread, further deepening the divide between the two families. Officially, Joe Imbo was never named a suspect. However, some of Richard's relatives remained skeptical. To Danielle's family, such insinuations felt not only baseless, but deeply offensive. The relationship between the two families was permanently fractured. The complete lack of clues, witnesses, or physical evidence left the investigation without a clear direction. In the absence of anything concrete, multiple theories emerged, each based on speculation. One of those theories suggested the couple's disappearance was the result of deliberate actions carried out by a third party. In February 2008, the FBI released an official statement proposing the possibility that professional actors may have been involved. The statement emphasized the total absence of evidence, especially the missing vehicle, as a potential indicator of a highly skilled operation. A truck that size couldn't simply vanish without a well-coordinated plan. According to investigators, the incident appeared to have been organized in advance and executed with precision. From that point on, the case was no longer seen as a standard missing persons situation. It was reclassified as a potential crime, possibly premeditated. Still, the investigation failed to identify a person of interest or motive. There was no indication that either Danielle or Richard had enemies or ties to any dangerous activity. Both led low-profile, steady lives. Neither had debts, criminal records, or known disputes that might explain such a targeted act. At a certain point, the FBI became formally involved in the investigation. They combed through bank accounts, credit histories, phone records, messages, employment details, social connections, and personal backgrounds for both Danielle and Richard. Everything came back clean. Another theory that circulated publicly suggested the possibility of a secret life. Some speculated that one or both may have been involved in undercover activity or had confidential roles that were not known to those around them. This theory arose from the idea that if no conventional explanation fit, perhaps something hidden was at play. The FBI explored that possibility too, but during the course of their review, they found nothing to support it. No documentation, no testimony, no technical evidence suggested that Danielle or Richard were involved in classified work or informal operations. From a law enforcement standpoint, the hypothesis lacked any factual basis and was ultimately dismissed as unlikely. None of the theories brought the case any closer to being solved. Instead, they highlighted the scope of the mystery. Even with substantial law enforcement resources, federal involvement, and widespread media coverage, the disappearance of 2 adults and a vehicle in the middle of a heavily populated region remained unexplainable. 10 years had passed since Danielle Imbo and Richard Petroni vanished. During that time, the case was revisited multiple times. New investigative teams were assigned, witnesses were re-interviewed, and leads were reassessed. But none of those efforts brought investigators any closer to understanding what happened. In 2015, authorities officially announced a comprehensive review of the case. More than 50 investigators were involved. They combed through every known detail, every report, and every contact. Over 300 new tips came in during the process. These leads came from various sources, ranging from concerned citizens to anonymous informants. Some reported possible sightings of the missing vehicle. Others claimed to have overheard strange conversations or had vague information about human remains. Yet every one of these tips was checked and ultimately dismissed as unrelated. None of the new angles supported or disproved the existing theories. One incident that stood out occurred in March 2005, about a month after the couple disappeared. A late-night anonymous phone call came in, stating that Danielle was inside a train car under the Walt Whitman Bridge and that her life was in danger. Police were immediately alerted. Officers responded to the scene, and Danielle's brother, John Otterbury, went there himself. They searched the area and inspected every freight car. No one was found. There were no signs of a person, a vehicle, or any recent activity. The tip was determined to be false, and the caller was never heard from again. Despite the years of effort and the volume of investigative work, the status of the case never changed. It remained open. Law enforcement never ruled out the possibility of deliberate foul play, but no one working on the case could develop a theory that withstood factual scrutiny. Just like in the early months, the main theories remained unproven. Attempts to link the case to other crimes led nowhere. Cross-checks against databases, including reports of unidentified remains, didn't result in any matches. At first glance, the idea that 2 adults and a vehicle could disappear in a city without any witnesses seemed almost impossible. There were countless opportunities for them to have been captured on camera, at intersections, near private homes, at ATMs, gas stations, or service shops. But not a single camera showed anything. The missing vehicle was one of the most critical aspects. A full-sized pickup truck with distinctive features doesn't just vanish. It can't be removed from the street without a tow truck or external assistance. But no tow records matched the description, and there were no confirmed reports of a similar vehicle being moved. Authorities checked junkyards, paid parking lots, auto repair shops, and private storage areas. The truck didn't show up in any system. Neither the FBI nor local investigators were able to develop a scenario that fit all the facts. No theory could explain how 2 adults and a vehicle could be removed from an urban setting without drawing any attention. The disappearance of Danielle Imbo and Richard Petrona became one of the most baffling and unexplained cases in modern investigative history. As of April this year, nearly 20 years later, the case remains unsolved. The FBI continues to actively investigate, and is offering a reward of up to $15,000 for information leading to the arrest and conviction of those responsible for their disappearance. Thanks for watching, everyone. Your support means a lot to me, and you can help my channel grow by hitting that like button, dropping a comment, and sharing this video. Your engagement really makes a difference. See you soon.